This is BBC One, it's 9 o'clock.
The news and campaign report with Michael Burke and David Davis.
The Liberal Democrats have accused the other two parties of gazing into the gutter. Paddy Ashdown said they were trawling for scare stories, not looking to Britain's future. Dr. David Owen endorses John Major with qualifications. The Scots Tory who said Labour would swamp the country with immigrants is shunned by enemies and colleagues. And it had to happen. First past the post in the National, a horse called party politics. Good evening. With only 4 days left before polling day, the parties have been gearing up for a last effort to get themselves elected. The Liberal Democrat leader Paddy Ashdown has accused the other two main parties of gazing resolutely into the gutter. The Conservatives have been saying that a Labour government would ruin the economic recovery. Labour has said John Major was personally responsible for the poll tax. The opinion polls in tomorrow's papers mainly indicate that Labour is in the lead. They range from suggesting the two main parties are level to a Labour lead of 6 points. The Liberal Democrats achieved their highest figure of the campaign in one poll. The BBC poll of polls, a weighted average of the 4 individual polls tonight, suggests Labour have maintained a 3% lead. The Conservatives are on 37, Labour 40, and the Liberal Democrats' midweek improvement is sustained on 19%.
The Liberal Democrats appear to be taking away support from both the Conservatives and Labour. But in most of their target constituencies, the main enemy is the Tories. And met by demonstrators in the West Country, Mr Ashdown spelt out the consequences.
I'll tell you this, I'll give you this promise. You vote Labour and you wake up Friday morning with another Tory MP.
It's important for Mr Ashdown not to give the impression that he would find it easier to work with a minority Labour government. That could send potential Labour defectors back to Mr Kinnock. And tonight Mr Ashdown was once again putting a plague on both their houses.
Those two with their gaze fixed resolutely on the gutter, trawling for some pathetic scare story to frighten the voters, those two, Tory and Labour, have refused to lift their eyes to a wider vision where Britain's future is in the making. We Liberal Democrats have been determined to keep that future firmly fixed in our minds during this campaign.
Mr Major had a breakfast meeting with business leaders. The Tories are hoping to entice wavering Liberal Democrats by arguing of serious economic problems under Labour or with a hung Parliament. At their news conference, Mr Major also once again attacked proportional representation for not producing firm government.
If you look across Europe and ask the leaders of many countries that have proportional representation, whatever sort they have, they wish they hadn't got it. And you don't need me to tell you which those countries are. You can go and see it. It took Brussels 100 days. It took Belgium 100 days to form a government. The Italians are not pleased with their system of proportional representation.
Mr Major wanted debate about constitutional change, but not because of the threat of a hung Parliament.
I hope these matters will become an issue up to the election and then after the election. And I hope they will all be subject not to backstairs trading or dealing, but the most sophisticated debate across the whole nation we can manage.
At Labour's news conference, too, speculation about backstairs deals was firmly stamped on.
There will be no deals, and there will be no need for any deals.
Labour were promoting their replacement for the poll tax, and Mr Kinnock believes that even if he were running a minority government, the Liberal Democrats wouldn't vote against Labour's fair rate scheme.
If they were, for some perverse reason, to vote against the reforms that we'll be introducing in order to get fair rates, then, of course, it would be probably the saddest day in the life of the modern Liberal Party.
In the Mail on Sunday, the former SDP leader, David Owen, has announced his support for Mr Major. The move was expected, but it's not unqualified support. Dr Owen says he's not a Conservative, and in his own constituency, he'll vote Liberal Democrat. He says John Major is a far better Prime Minister than ever Neil Kinnock could be. I like him personally, and I trust his judgment far more than I will ever trust the judgment of Neil Kinnock.
He's a man of considerable intellectual integrity and I think greatly respected by voters, so any party that he was to support would, I think, benefit greatly.
People are rather more concerned with the recession, with the underfunding of the health and education services, and the fact that we've got a do-nothing government than they are with the personal recommendations of a politician who is not standing in this election.
Mr Ashdown repeated a joke he made when he first heard Dr Owen would back the Tories.
Well, my view is that this is only fair. I think that the other three parties have had David Owen support. I think it's only fair that he can.
Another former influential politician also tried to influence voters. Because of his strong views on Europe, Enoch Powell, once a Tory minister and later an Ulster Unionist, gave this advice to a voter in Mr Major's constituency.
But I will be candid with him and say, if you vote for the Conservative candidate, you betray your country.
With only 4 days of campaigning left, the parties have very few shots left in their lockers. Their only hope is that wavering voters will be open to last-minute persuasion. In the past, opinion has sometimes appeared to shift significantly in the last few days, and with a race so close, no one can afford to relax.
And later in the programme, we'll be looking at the political fate of those like Dr Owen who rejected the merger of the old Liberal and Social Democratic parties. Now, 5 out of 6 of the national opinion polls and panel surveys in tomorrow's Sunday newspapers put Labour ahead. The 6th suggests the two main parties are level. With the full details and his analysis of the findings, here's Peter Snow.
Well, Labour leads the field as they enter the final straight, but their current level of support wouldn't quite present Mr Kinnock with an outright victory. Only one of tonight's 6 surveys would put him in number 10 with an overall majority. Of tonight's polls, the two which sampled earliest are Gallup in tomorrow's Sunday Telegraph, which puts the Conservatives level with Labour on 37.5, and the Liberal Democrats on 22, their highest figure in any poll of the campaign so far. Harris, for the Observer, has the Conservatives on 38%, Labour on 40%, and the Liberal Democrats on 17%. Interviewing for both of these was done Thursday and Friday. ICM for the Sunday Express puts the Conservatives on 37%, 2 behind Labour, who are on 39%, and the Liberal Democrats on 19%. Interviewing was done all on Friday. And NOP for the Mail on Sunday puts the Conservatives on 35%, that's 6 points behind Labour on 41%. The Liberal Democrats on 20%. NOP's interviewing yesterday and today. So, when you look at the party in the lead in the 4 polls, Gallup puts them level, and the other 3 put Labour ahead. 27 out of the 39 polls in the campaign so far have put Labour ahead. 11 have favoured the Tories, plus, of course, that one dead heat on the left there in tonight's Gallup. 2 panel surveys tonight also put Labour ahead. Murray in the Sunday Times has them 2% ahead. NOP in the Independent on Sunday puts them 3% ahead. Now, last Sunday, the same panels put Labour 2% ahead in Murray and 1% in NOP, so only NOP shows a small shift to Labour. Now, tonight's poll of polls leaves out the panels and averages just the 4 opinion polls. And it shows only a small shift from when the race began 3.5 weeks ago. Then, Labour were on 41%, the Tories 2% behind, and the Liberal Democrats on 15%. During the first full week, Labour broadly stayed ahead. Then, in week 2, the gap closed briefly, but then Labour opened it up again with the Liberal Democrats gaining some ground. This week, Labour's briefly opened up a gap of 4 points, but tonight they're back to just 3 points ahead in our poll of polls. Labour are down 1 point on where they began the campaign, the Conservatives down 2, and the Liberal Democrats, the main gainers, up 4. Now, here's the difference between tonight's party support and the last general election in 1987. The Conservatives down 6%. Labour up 8%. That's a swing to Labour of 7% when you average the 6 and the 8. The Liberal Democrats down 4, where the Alliance were last time, and the others up 2. So what would those changes in party support do to the shape of the House of Commons if people vote next Thursday exactly as they're now telling the pollsters they will vote? If we apply those changes precisely in every seat, Almost certain to be on the opposition benches, the Conservatives will be the smaller of the two main parties with 290 MPs. Beside them, the Liberal Democrats on 19. We've made no allowance for any local successes they may have. The others, Nationalists and Unionists, 24. And on the government benches, there's the winning post, the 326 Labour needs for an overall majority, and they wouldn't quite make it. With 318 MPs, they'd be just short by 8 of an overall majority.